Hey Internet, it's Matt here for the Dork Lords. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We talk about all manner of dorkly things here, so whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes, we probably have a playlist about it. Feel free to check us out. Today is another in our Dork Lord of the Rings segments. And today I'm going to be talking about the original Ring of Doom. So, when most people hear Ring of Doom, they probably think of Sauron's ring. The One Ring, the ruling ring. Has a lot of names. One of them being the Ring of Doom. There's that song that I'm pretty sure Tolkien didn't actually write from the animated Return of the King, where we have the little warbly Frodo of the Nine Fingers and the Ring of Doom. That ring. Also, there is a mention of it. It's that great moment when Sam, in Return of the King, Sam is talking to Frodo and he's reflecting on what people will think when they think of the legend of Frodo and Sam, that they are making themselves mythic figures. I'll read a little section of that real fast. This is Sam talking. "What a tale we've been in, Mr. Frodo, haven't we?" he said. "I wish I could hear it told. Do you think they'll say, 'Now comes the story of Nine-Fingered Frodo and the Ring of Doom'? And then everyone will hush, like we did, when in Rivendell they told us the tale of Baron One Hand and the Great Jewel. I wish I could hear it, and I wonder how it will go on after our part." All right, awesome. Reflecting on their place in mythic history. Two things to note there. One, he mentions Ring of Doom. Second, he mentions Baron and the Great Jewel. Just put a pin in that because that kind of comes in to play later on as I describe how this fits in with the original Ring of Doom. Okay. If you read the Silmarillion, Tolkien mentions the Ring of Doom many times. And never once is it the Ring of Doom that you think of. He is describing instead a place. It's a location. It's Mahanaxar is the other name for it, otherwise known as the Ring of Doom. It is, we can assume it's circular, but it's a place, think of it as a court practically, or a council setting for the Valar. We know there's 14 Valar, 7 male, 7 female, and they've got their thrones laid out in some kind of a circular pattern. And this is where they meet to either have councils or to judge, to create pronouncements of great import. The Ring of Doom. In this case, Doom, I believe, is meaning more to be like fate, the Ring of Fate. Many of the decisions that take place in this Ring of Doom affect the outcome to the point that we see its effects reverberating through Middle-earth during the Third Age when the War of the Ring is happening. And that's kind of when I show you the connection between the first Ring of Doom and the last Ring of Doom. Okay, so when we first are introduced to this concept of this place called the Ring of Doom, it's before the First Age, so we're way before, I mean thousands and thousands of years before the War of the Ring, okay? And at this moment, Yavanna, one of the Valar, is growing what have become the trees of Valinor. And they are basically the light source for Valinor. And as it turns out, we find out that these trees are being grown on a mound very near to the Ring of Doom. The Ring of Doom is just outside the gates of Valmar, the great city of the Valar. And right nearby are where these two trees, Laurelin and Telperion, the trees of the Valinor, are about to grow. And so here's a little scene that encapsulates, you can hear Tolkien describe the Ring of Doom in this moment and the growing of the trees. In that time, the Valar were gathered together to hear the song of Yavanna, and they sat silent upon their thrones of council in the Mahanaxar, the Ring of Doom, near to the golden gates of Valmar. And Yavanna sang before them, and they watched. And as they watched, upon the mound there came forth 2 slender shoots, and silence was over all the world in that hour. Nor was there any other sound save the chanting of Yavanna. Under her song the saplings grew and became fair and tall and came to flower, and thus there awoke in the world the 2 trees of Valinor. Okay, so obviously it's a pretty important place. It's right next to the trees, for one thing. And that's where they gathered to witness this amazing event. Okay. Now we get flash forward a bit. There's the war for the sake of the elves. When Melkor doesn't heed their warning, they're like, hey, don't screw with the elves or we're going to come for you. He screws with the elves. They come for him. There's a big war. They capture Melkor. This is where they bring Melkor to judge him. He is brought to the Ring of Doom. I'll read that little passage really fast just to give you that idea again, how the Ring of Doom plays into these momentous occasions. But when the battle was ended, the Valar drew Melkor back to Valinor, bound hand and foot and blindfolded, and he was brought to the Ring of Doom. There he lay upon his face before the feet of Manve and sued for pardon, but his prayer was denied, and he was cast into prison in the fastness of Mendos, whence none can escape, neither Vala, nor elf, nor mortal man. Okay, so they bring Melkor to this spot. They judge him. He asks for leniency, and they refuse him. And so they put him into prison for, they say, 3 ages. Now, an age, we know the first age, the second age, and the third age, how long those are. But this is before the first age, technically. And so the amount of time that each of these ages was back in the day, Tolkien's never that clear. People generally ascribe about 1,000 years per age, but some ascribe it as much as 10,000 years in age. Anyway, we'll just say that for a period of about 3,000 years, Melkor is put into prison. At some point, the Valar decide, all right, you know, you've been there for a while, let's take you out and let's see if you reformed. And so Melkor is brought again to the Ring of Doom, and he states his case for why he should be released. And, you know, he realizes he better tell a good story here because this is maybe his last chance of seeing freedom. And so he, you know, spins a good yarn about how he's changed, and he begs for leniency. And notably, there is one of the Valar, Nienna. She's the goddess of sorrow, and she says a prayer for him. She speaks on his behalf. And actually, in the Silmarillion, there's a note right after it says that Nienna, stated Melkor's case that Mendos remained silent. His silence is interesting in that moment because he's probably one who would speak against releasing Melkor, right? He's been his jailer essentially for 3,000 years. We get the idea that he would be against releasing Melkor, but in that moment he decides not to speak. And so the Valar make what history would probably judge as a mistake. They basically let Melkor out on probation, essentially. They're like, all right, fine, we're going to let you out, but you have to stay around here. You have to be under our guidance here in Valinor, and but you get your freedom. We're not chaining you and putting you in prison anymore. You know, he accepts, obviously, and over time he cons his way into getting, you know, certain privileges, and then eventually he escapes and is back on the loose and does horrible things until finally the War of Wrath is several years later. So in any case, they made a mistake in letting him out. Another major choice that is made, or I should say momentous occasion that happened in the Ring of Doom, involved Feanor. Now, I should do a video or two on Feanor. Feanor is one of the most influential elves in Tolkien's history. His story is crazy. It's got so many twists and turns in it. It's almost intimidating to try to recount Feanor's story. So I'm not going to do it here. I'll tell you the bits that are connected to the Ring of Doom. But needless to say, I will tackle that subject at some point, and it might be, I might break those videos up because his life story is very complex. But at some point, one of the things we know about Feanor that's amazing is he's the guy that crafts the Silmarils. The Silmarils are who the Silmarillion is named for. They're created through the light of the trees of Valinor. So that light of the trees that grew up at just outside of the Ring of Doom, that light is captured in the Silmarils. Notably, Feanor also created the Palantiri, so the Palantirs that we see, the Seeing Stones that Sauron uses, Saruman, Denethor. Those were originally crafted by Feanor the elf. At some point, Feanor basically draws a sword on one of his kin, his half-brother, and that's a no-no. That's internal strife is a bad thing. You're not supposed to do that to your fellow elves, and so he is brought before the Ring of Doom for judgment. And the judgment of the Valar at that time is to exile Feanor from the city of Tirion, where most of his elves lived. So he's exiled for a period of 11 years, I believe. It's not a horrible sentence, all things considered, but it first serves to further harden him against the Valar. Eventually, he's going to be pretty anti-Valar, and this doesn't help him on that road. So during that 11 years, sometime in the middle there, before his sentence is up, Melkor decides to act and do something horribly destructive. All right, a couple of things happen at the same time in this moment. So the Valar have decided, you know what? Even though the exile is still going on, why don't we try to make amends? Let's have Feanor and his half-brother meet up here in Valinor, and they can maybe shake hands, and we'll kind of call a truce. And let's do it at this big festival that we have. When they invite Feanor to come, and everyone's, basically security gets a little lax. Everybody's kind of involved in being festive and not in necessarily being vigilant. So that's when Melkor decides to strike and destroy the trees of Valinor. Festival's going on. Melkor arrives with Ungoliant, giant spider, and they destroy the trees, which again are right next to our Ring of Doom. So they may have been standing in the Ring of Doom trying to destroy the trees. But anyway, so in terms of location, they were right there. They're successful and they flee. After that, the Valar return. They come to the Ring of Doom, and they sit in despaired silence, seeing the destruction of these beautiful trees that had lit the entire continent. They're just heartbroken. So Feanor was in town, right? I mean, he was there and he actually did make amends with his half brother. But now they ask him, hey, the only way we're going to be able to rekindle the light of these trees is with your gems. Your gems carry the light of these trees. Yavanna can't redo that spell. That's a one-time only thing. It took so much effort that she can't reproduce that magic that required to create these trees again. So the only way we can light the world the way it was before is with your Silmarils. And Feanor thinks about it. And again, this is happening, the Ring of Doom. He decides no. And in this, we get the idea that the Silmarils have started to, they are somewhat like the the actual ring, in the kind of the My Precious thing of like, they're so precious, they're so valuable that they encourage kind of a lust for keeping them, you know, to oneself. And so Feanor is like, yeah, I understand, but no, I'm keeping these gems. I'm not breaking them so that you can bring light back to Valinor. And before everybody's had a chance to even digest all that information, basically a rider comes in and tells them, hey, in Melkor's escape after destroying these trees, he fled, he went to Feanor's kingdom, Formenos, stole the Silmarils, so he couldn't even break them if he wanted to, because he doesn't have them anymore. Melkor's got them, and he killed Feanor's dad, Finwë. At that point, you know, Feanor leaves to try to go back and, you know, find out what happened and get vengeance on Melkor. And so he's obviously very upset with Melkor, but he's also upset with the Valar. He partially blames the Valar for calling him to Valinor to, you know, make amends. And thus he was away from Formenos when Melkor attacked and killed his father. And so he blames Melkor, but he also blames the Valar, and that anger, you know, grows to the point where eventually, you know, he makes this oath that's very ill-advised, where he basically, and he makes his 7 sons swear on the same oath that whoever takes the Silmarils, in his mind, he thinks, oh, it's Melkor, so I'll just make this oath, you know, and that means we have to go attack. But he basically says, anybody who's got the Silmarils, we're going to seek revenge and never rest until we get those gems back. So, you know, woe unto anyone who takes the Silmarils. Well, as it turns out, in future years, there's some elves that get Silmarils. The Beren and Luthien story, the great jewel that's talked about in that story, that's one of the Silmarils. And so what that means is, by this oath, he and his sons, especially his sons after Feanor passes away, are forced to attack fellow elves, and it becomes basically a civil war. And so society kind of starts breaking apart in that moment. And a lot of that is traced back to the events that occurred in the Ring of Doom, as these Valar talked to Feanor, and he basically denied them in some way. So there's that part, you know, part of Tolkien myth that takes place in the Ring of Doom. And the final part that I'll mention for the Ring of Doom is actually from the Unfinished Tales. And it doesn't say Ring of Doom per se, but I think it's a fairly strong case to be made that the event I'm about to talk about takes place in the Ring of Doom. This is now flash forward to the Third Age. We're, you know, 2,000 years before the War of the Ring now, which sounds like a lot, but considering how far away it was, this is actually pretty close in time. Basically, the Valar call a council together, hence the reason I think it's at the Ring of Doom. And this council is deciding how to handle the reappearance of Sauron. They're worried. Sauron is, you know, he wasn't completely destroyed in the War of the Last Alliance, which ended the Second Age. 1,000 years have now passed, and the Valar are concerned that Sauron is going to reemerge, and they would like to help the people of Middle-earth. How do you do that? Let's send emissaries. They decide to send 3 emissaries. And the first emissary chosen is Saruman. He's called Kurumo, but that's another name for Saruman. Saruman is chosen. Then Alatar, one of the Blue Wizards. I've done a Blue Wizards video if you want to check that out. But Alatar is chosen. And then it's Manwë. Manwë is essentially the king of the Valar. He's not the uber high. I mean, Eru stands above the Valar. But in terms of who has the authority in the Valar, it's Manwë. And Manwë asks about Aloran. Aloran is the name for Gandalf. He wants Gandalf to go. Gandalf has just returned from another mission and kind of shows up belatedly at the Ring of Doom and basically tries to swear off being chosen. He says, "No, you know, I'm too weak for this. This challenge is too much for me. I fear Sauron, and I am not sure that I have what it takes to defeat him." And Manve says, "Well, that's exactly why you should go. You fear Sauron. That's perfect. You know, if you were cocky and overconfident, you would not be as effective as you would be with your current state of mind. So you should go." And he convinces Gandalf to go, and he says Gandalf should be the third. Interestingly, it's noted that I think it's Varda says, well, you know, not the third, actually. In other words, saying, actually, I think he's probably the most powerful, you know, the best chance we've got of these three people you've chosen. And it's Saruman. It's noted that Saruman took note of that. And so my guess is that that sparked a degree of envy between Saruman and Gandalf, where he heard that the Valar were actually a little more confident in Gandalf's abilities than they were in his. To someone who takes you know, he's a very prideful person, so that would have been a big shot to his ego. Then what we get is that Yavanna begs Saruman to take Radagast with him. She's worried about the flora and fauna, and so wants to include Radagast. So Saruman agrees, relents, takes Radagast kind of as his second. And Alatar takes Palando, another blue wizard, because they're friends. And he wants a friend with him. Why not? So it's only Gandalf that doesn't really get to take a second with him. Just Gandalf goes on his own. But what we get there then is another amazingly important, momentous occasion, choices made that will affect the future of Middle-earth that happen right there in the Ring of Doom. So again, just to, you know, we've got, and actually, interestingly, you know, that's, this Ring of Doom is the meeting is happening right next to what used to be the trees of the Valinor. I wonder, you know, if there's even anything left at that point in the Third Age. But the idea that, you know, that's where the light used to be, and then we made this choice to free Melkor, and that light was destroyed, and now we're meeting here. It almost provides more of the sense of wisdom from experience. There's a direct example of that right next to them as they meet to talk about, you know, the safety of the people of Middle-earth. Kind of, you know, heady stuff. So, just to take it all into consideration and just sum it up. You've got some choices made with Melkor. The Valar make a horrible mistake in letting him go. You've got Feanor and the beginnings of his obstinance and his resistance to the Valar that lead to civil war and a major split with the elves and the Valar. And you've got the Valar deciding that something needs to be done about Melkor's chief disciple, Sauron, who is now growing in power again. And in fact, you know, the Ring of Doom, the ring of, you know, Sauron's ring has not been destroyed. And so we're meeting at the Ring of Doom to decide what to do about the Ring of Doom. And so, yeah, there's a lot of what transpires in the War of the Ring is established by people meeting and making decisions in the Ring of Doom. Feanor and the Palantir, again, another great connection to that. I'll mention one last little bit that I think will be relevant to the Amazon series. It occurred to me when I was thinking about the Ring of Doom is obviously one of the reasons it's called that is because it's made in Mount Doom. It's crafted in the volcano of Mount Doom. And we know that in the War of the Ring, when the ring is finally thrown into, or Gollum falls into Mount Doom, it erupts, right? And that kind of signals the end of the War of the Ring. There's this big eruption. But people might not remember that it actually erupts in the Second Age to show the beginning of Sauron's assault on Gondor. And so I could imagine at some point, maybe not the first season, if it would be, it might be toward the end of the first season or maybe second season, but somewhere in there, I think in the Amazon series, we will see that Second Age eruption of Mount Doom as the signal that Sauron is now waging war on Gondor. But in any case, there we go. All things Doom. The Ring of Doom, as Tolkien originally laid it out, considering he was using the same verbiage, I had to think that he realized there was a connection there and was fine with making this have the same nomenclature as the ring that Sauron wears. So there you go, everybody. The original Ring of Doom. If you have any topics you'd like me to talk about, feel free to put them in the comments. I'd be happy to chat about a topic of your choosing. And until next time, bye, everybody.